everybody. Carlton Pearson. Welcome to ComeMonday.org. Come Sunday was the movie. Come Monday is the movement away from some of the traditional doctrines and dogmas and paradigms of thought into a brand new way of looking at yourself. I was thinking today about old wine from my religious background as a preacher and pastor and ultimately a bishop in the church. Old wine skins, and old winos. I mean, people that just got drunk off that old wine and are intoxicated and are still so inebriated they can't think straight. I believe in the new wine skins, not repairing old wine skins, but replacing them with new wine skins. And one of the things that is new wine for me is to become more of a sacred activist, to get involved in social and civil issues at a level I didn't in my background as a fundamentalist, evangelical, classical Pentecostal preacher, closely tied with Oral Roberts, the Oral Roberts University, and Christian television, and all the people who, interestingly enough, are in the Donald Trump camp at largest numbers we've ever seen a single candidate attract in many, many years. And I just have had some strong feelings about it, and I've been addressing them online a lot. Those of you who've been following me know that I have, and I haven't done that before, but I feel like it's a mandate. I think that the country is as polarized as it's ever been, both politically, racially, opinion-wise. We really feel the tension and the stress. We're almost in a place of grief and mourning because we've lost our solidarity. We don't feel like the United States. Because united doesn't mean uniformity, so we don't look the same, dress the same, act the same, or even think the same, but we have a general opinion about each other that is mostly pleasant and tolerant, if not celebrative. So I thought I'd get more involved, and I have, and I actually invited the gentleman who's going to be with us tonight. Our guest is Tim Gilpin. I've been calling him Congressman Tim Gilpin. He's running for the 1st District United States Congressman. He happened to show up at church where I was speaking at All Souls one Sunday, and we introduced him. I got to meet him personally. Shortly thereafter, we had lunch. In that short period of time, I picked his brain, and I've been studying his thoughts, and I like the way he thinks. And one of the main concerns I had is that Tulsa, Oklahoma, is such a thickly red state. Every commercial I saw on television was really GOP, and I'm not against GOP. I was involved in that party from 1980 up until Obama ran because of my involvement with the fundamentalist religious group and my preacher friends. We went down to the governor's mansion and I laid hands on George Bush. But I had been in Herbert W.'s White House several times as a guest and sat around tables and was part of the faith-based initiative with George Bush and the 1,000 Points of Light with H.W. And then I just had a shift in consciousness, sort of a theological crisis and a philosophical crisis. And I shifted, so here I am today. Actually, I had Tim at my home a few nights ago. We had a very successful, in attendance and attitude and spirit, and hopefully financially, fundraiser and meet and greet. And people came. And it was just, I've never done anything like that before. My friend Mark Roby kind of helped me because he had one for Drew Edmondson, and I just, because of the pulpit stuff, I didn't get involved. But I'm really involved. I really feel a mandate, if I could use the religious terms, from God or just from the universe, from purpose, from my destiny, to introduce this man to you, to this audience. And I know you're a national and international audience, but many are looking locally in the Tulsa, Oklahoma area. His name is Tim Gilpin. He is, we're going to run, let's just run the spot first, okay? I'm going to run a spot, his recent spot. I love it. We showed it the other night on the big screen. And then I'm going to let him, I'm not going to do all the talking. I'm going to let him share, and I'll ask him a few questions. But we're going to spend the whole program tonight talking with this man about a difference that he believes he can make. And I'm pretty convinced and persuaded that he can help make a major difference in the way this state looks, in the way this state thinks, in the way this state is represented in the United States Congress and in the world. Let's roll the spot. And the next face you'll see is this handsome gentleman, Tim Gilpin, when we get back.
Kevin Hart and Donald Trump think voters...
No, wait a minute. I'm Tim Gilpin, And I don't approve of ads that treat voters like they're stupid. It's 2018, and the last people we need in Congress are the same old phony politicians who try to get your vote with their slick 30-second parades of empty promises. I mean, who doesn't appreciate hardworking guys in hard hats? Or children running through a field, grandparents sipping coffee, and puppies. I won't try to persuade you to vote for me based on the rolled-up sleeves of my blue-collared shirt, or the cool, hip people I'm pretending to share a laugh with, or tug on your heartstrings standing in front of a billowing American flag. It's time for real talk and real solutions. I'm Tim Gilpin, and I'm interested in serving the people of Oklahoma, not special interests. It's time to put people first again. Now that's a message I can approve of.
I haven't seen a smile like that one. Whoever put it together, really good, unique, good feel. Welcome to the program, sir.
Thank you, Bishop. Thank you very much. And it's a pleasure to be here with you. It was a pleasure to be in your home, and it's been a pleasure to worship with you from time to time.
Yes, thank you. One thing that's important is people sometimes have an attitude that people in the Democratic Party are not faith-based people. They may not be the same religion, but most of the ones I know, and I know a lot of Democrats, a lot of congresspersons, and some of them, Democrats don't tend to tout their faith or their religion as much as Republicans. But this man is a man of faith. He's a solid believer. And he's Catholic, that's his background, which is one of the greatest denominations that influence our city. I know Bishop Slattery. I was a good friend of former Governor Frank Keating, and I actually did his inaugural prayer breakfast at Holy Family downtown. It was just wonderful.
Yeah.
That was in my Republican days, but now I'm a believer in people. Not just God and faith that way, but I am attracted to you because I think you offer a positive, powerful alternative to what is being offered. I didn't see very many spots for GOP candidates. Maybe the money wasn't the same. But I didn't, when you came along, I said, I've been waiting for you.
Thank you.
We've been waiting for you. And when we saw you in church, you just came in and they said, he's here. And we acknowledged you. You didn't say anything. We didn't ask you to say anything. You were just there smiling, which is a very responsible thing to do. And when I shook your hand, and after so many other people got through, because they were all over you, that was impressive. And when we ate down, we had coffee downtown. Going in and going out, the people recognized you. One of my friend Leslie Pendrels, who I love, a powerful Methodist minister, also a missionary. She was sitting at the table. She said, "Oh, I've been to a fundraiser for him. I know him. She said, we're following him. We like him."
I'm glad.
So that was
glad.
Very good. So tell us what you're thinking. Somebody said, it was both Mahatma Gandhi and Einstein said, those who believe religion and politics aren't connected don't understand either.
That's right. That's right. Well, I am a person of faith. I did grow up Catholic, Episcopalian now. Trinity Episcopal is my home church now.
Oh, precious Trinity, that's where we spent a whole year.
It really is. And I appreciate the separation between church and state. That's sacred.
Right.
But I also understand how politicians, political figures can be motivated in a good way by faith.
Yes.
Can be motivated by the desire to help people and to work for the greater good and to generate more of everything in abundance for everybody, depending on how we approach government and how we approach people all over the place. But, I'm born and raised here and have served Oklahoma as an assistant attorney general back at the end of the 80s under Robert Henry.
Yes.
And then served 6 years on the State Board of Education, where I fought very hard for education.
You're a great proponent for education.
Yes.
Increase in teacher pay and what have you.
That's right. Back when it wasn't all that popular.
Yeah.
Back we were going through the Great Recession, and then we had a red wave, and politically, and boy, education was not the tip top of everyone's docket at that point. But I stood up then, and I'm proud of that, and I'm proud of the people who stood up with me on that State Board of Education against bad education policies and against education cuts, even back around 2011. So that's really important to me, and I think one thing the American vision really is and always has been about is about the common good. And that's best exemplified by public education and what we do or don't do with it. And when we invest in public education, I think we invest not only in our society, but in our economy as well, and all of our well-being, because we're all connected. Your success is connected to mine and mine to yours, and
Yes,
so
sir.
forth and so forth.
Sure. I love the term the common good. That's a good way to look at it. Community is common unity. Communion is a religious term, but it also means common union. The common good of all the people, everybody getting their share. I like that. That's the way I look at affordable care.
Right.
It's interesting how many people will tell you they vote for, they are for affordable care, but they're against Obamacare and don't know it's the same thing.
Right, exactly, exactly. Well, you know, and so I talk a lot about education, health care, and a living wage. And I've just told you how dedicated I am to education
yes.
and to bringing federal tax dollars back home to supplement our state and district budget. Because every year Congress runs an education bill. We just haven't had a United States representative bringing those federal tax dollars home to our schools to supplement for all kinds of needs and grants and programs. But the second thing is health care, because health care is on the tip of everybody's tongue, as it should be.
Yeah.
You know, I support the Affordable Health Care Act. I think having 20 million plus more people under health insurance is a good thing.
Yes, sir.
We forget the bad old days when we had those 20 plus million people without health insurance,
Right.
but still showing up at the emergency room.
And sometimes being turned away.
That's right. That's right. And so I think the Affordable Health Care Act shouldn't be taken apart like they're doing now. I think it should be put back together and made better. I think we should look at Medicare and expanding it.
Don't end it, amend it.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's so important right now that folks realize that on the table in Congress is the pre-existing condition exemption. You know, the Affordable Health Care Act said that insurance companies and plans could no longer have a pre-existing exemption to the plan, which means in my case, like I was born as a baby with asthma. So at different times in my life, asthma reemerges. And so I would always have to check that box. What are your problems? In the old days, asthma, which means you couldn't get treated for what your very needs were for a period of time, pre-existing. Right now, Congress and the leadership in Congress and this administration are talking about reinstituting the pre-existing condition to save money.
But that's not saving lives.
No, and that's not really saving money. I mean, you can maybe buy a junk policy that isn't worth anything, but it doesn't cover anything. And your pre-existing condition, think about all the people. It's so important to their access to affordable health care would be gone.
I remember my grandmother died of cancer in 1964. She was only 53 years old.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And when she died, of course, she died sitting on because she didn't have health care. Her stomach burst, and she was on a gurney in what they call the county hospital in San Diego. She was bleeding and hemorrhaging and in great pain, and there was a bunch of sick people in there who didn't have proper coverage.
Right.
And she died a couple of days after that, and I grieved over that reality in our country. And when affordable health care was offered, I just leapt in my spirit over joy, with joy over the possibility of it occurring. I saw another man come there. I saw my grandfather who couldn't read. They couldn't read documents and papers. This is in the 50s and 60s. He would go in his pocket and hand out cash to the gentleman that came, always a white man that would come to our house in the 60s, even in Southern California. Didn't necessarily come across as a racist, but I knew he was manipulating my grandfather's mind because my grandfather couldn't read. And he gave him all that cash. I saw it for years, from the time I was a little kid till she died, and when I was only 10 years old, but they didn't have money to even bury her. So there's a lot of people wounded in this culture around education.
And healthcare.
And healthcare. People call it not sociology, socialism. I like aspects of it. It's communion. It's common union. Certain aspects of it that takes care of the common needs of the people. Why do you think it is that any particular group would, whether it's education or healthcare, would not be for spending more money on educating our youth and paying the teachers?
Sure. Let me tell you why. So on the State Board of Education, the red wave came, like love it or hate it, right?
Yeah.
And I was in those rooms at the end of my 6-year term where those discussions were had. And there are folks, politicians in power, who don't believe in public education. They've never believed in it, and they want it to move toward a private system.
What?
Yeah, and thus the vouchers, the voucher proposals, which would never cover a middle class or working class person's children's education in private schools. But that's that. And then the idea was they would leave the remaining children behind. And people don't realize this, but if you think hard, you can see it, that they were going to put them in large warehouse-type schools where they learned off computers. And the teachers were really instructors who would go up and down the aisles and monitor the use of the computer instruction. And that was the idea. So it's difficult for folks to fathom that there are politicians who don't believe in public education. There are politicians who don't necessarily accept the idea that the country is better off when more people have affordable access to health care. It's kind of like you're on your own. I've got mine. Good luck with yours. Wish you the best. But in a modern 21st century economy and nation, think about it for a moment. We are the richest, most powerful nation the earth has ever seen. Right? And we're all very proud of that. I'm very proud of that.
Right.
We've got to come to a point where health care is a right, not a privilege. Not only on a moral basis, not only on a personal set of belief basis, but on an economic basis. Because if you think of a workforce where a large or sizable segment doesn't have access to affordable health care, well, they're sicker. They tend to not show up for work, productivity. They don't tend to be as happy. And we end up with a situation where the folks who make the economic engine run aren't able to work as much as they'd like to or should, aren't able to contribute as much as we'd all like everybody to, and aren't paying the amount of taxes we'd all like everyone to contribute to make the system work. So it's really economical, and it really makes more sense that in the 21st century Western democracy, we have affordable, accessible health care for all. Because, and the argument I had with my opponent in this race at a forum was regarding expanding the Medicare option. Medicare for all, some people call it a public option. Different varieties of the plan. Was the cost. And he was very, very concerned about the trillions of dollars it cost. And my response is, we're spending trillions upon trillions of dollars right now, you, me, the government, and everybody else, for health care that is not always adequate and not always up to par and not always accessible. But I pay a pretty penny, and you may too, for a health insurance policy that I'm not 100% happy with. So we're all already paying that money. We're just not getting access to great health care, at least most of us. So when you think of what the investment is affordable because the money we're paying now will hopefully be put to a system where we get that health care. We're healthier, we're more productive, we're showing up at work, we're showing up to school, and we're becoming the entrepreneurs and the great employees and the great folks that makes this engine run.
I come from a background of poverty and lack of education. Born in 1953, the big civil rights movement hadn't even started, so there was issues with racism, and there was even some of our people, a lot of people didn't even support Dr. King because he was a rebel rouser. They thought he was rocking the boat and all that kind of a thing. I came through all that. I'm very sensitive to hurting people, sick and suffering humanity, as Orwell used to call them. I'm very sensitive to the underdog, to the underprivileged, to the person that has the short end of the stick. The GOP party seems to be increasingly insensitive to the pain and pathos of the bulk of the people.
Right.
Jesus says, the poor you will have with you always. He also said, I've come to preach the gospel to the poor. That's his inaugural address.
He also said, don't ignore the poor.
Of course. Repeatedly says, don't ignore the poor, or the foreigners, or the immigrants.
Right.
Where's the compassion behind the compassion of so many people who seem to support a compassionless, non-sympathetic, non-empathetic leadership? I'm here to bash Trump, but he seems to be the most passionately dispassionate person when it comes to hurting, suffering humanity. Whether it's people at the border, whether it's families being ripped apart, and the people that have family values are supposed to be supportive of this man. they say they love, but there's a difference in love and compassion. What is your position, even now, if I can put you on the spot, what's your position on these 7,000 or 8,000 Hondurans walking another 1,000 miles from us?
Sure.
You know, and wearing who's funding that? How's that happening? What do you think we should do about something like that?
All right, well, let me start from the beginning. My concern about what's coming out of Washington right now in the Trump administration is it's chaos, it's dysfunctional, it's rude, and it's disrespectful.
Yes.
And they also, I see the president and Republicans in Congress not solving problems. I see them creating problems. And then I see them acting upon the suffering or certain other issues, making issues just for political gain, to make it a gimmick. Now, their so-called caravan. You know, in the history of our border, there have been ever so often groups of people who approach it seeking asylum. They're not trying to sneak in, number one. They want to approach it and go up to the guards and seek asylum. Right. But secondly, I think in all over the media, they've kind of bitten off on this idea that this is an army-like group of people. I think the best estimate I saw was it really was a couple of thousand of women, children, and fathers. It's terrible when I hear the president call them terrorists or thugs.
And now he's saying that Middle Easterners have somehow, he has no proof of that.
There's no proof. But let's just assume somewhere in that group there are people we wouldn't like, right?
There would be an
and 2,000 people, right? Well, they're approaching the border and they have to go through a process of asylum. So there's a whole system to figure out who's there and who's asking for asylum. But what's really happening is ever so many years, a group of people in Guatemala, Honduras, and other Latin and South American countries will be under such violence and such despair in their countries that the mothers literally will pick up their children and walk thousands of miles for what they hope is a better life or a better opportunity. Now, this is a group of approximately, I think, 2,000 to 3,000 people.
The news said close to 7, but they may be inflating the number.
I think that's it, but let's just say several thousand people. And they have walked from their countries a couple of thousand miles away. And they're now not on our border, but they're at the Mexican southern border with, I believe, Guatemala or Honduras. And they're 900 some odd miles away from our border, right? So I think what we need to do is recognize, first off, who and what they are. People fleeing violence and despair, so desperate that they would just simply walk with their children.
This is not a normal situation, by the way. Anybody that would walk thousands of miles, how many times do they change their shoes? Where do they use the restroom? Where do they eat?
Where do they sleep?
Where do they bathe? Where do they sleep? All this has to be brought. It's not just a horde of people.
Totally dependent upon the goodness of the people they run into along the way, or lack of goodness. Because usually, the reason they're in a group is because typically when families do this, they're subject to every thief and hoodlum along the way, and in groups they feel safer. But what do we do about it, right? We talk to our neighbors to the south, like we have in the past, to figure out why they want to come and what problems we can help our neighbors with so that they don't feel the need to walk thousands of dangerous miles to come to our border with whatever despair and problems that they have.
Meaning, if there is a despotic government that is torturing, tormenting, killing their own people,
and crime and drugs,
and through crime and drugs, and adding that it's not really just the love of money that's the root of all evil, it's the lack of it. That's what I learned from Reverend Ike years ago. That statement makes the lack of money, a fair distribution of the funds and the food and the education. We should do something from the UN to our allies in NATO. Let's make the Honduran government reconsider how they're treating their own citizens. Our Statue of Liberty says, give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to be free, the restless refuge of your teeming shores. Send these, the homeless tempest tossed to me. I lift my lamp beside the golden door. That's, on parchment, and I mean that's etched in the Statue of Liberty. But yet we're ignoring it. And so many so-called, and I can talk from an evangelical Pentecostal background, too many Christians are ignoring the tenderness that Jesus would have used in the poor and always talked about reaching out to the poor. I just have to throw that in because the church is all behind Trump.
Right, but if we were really, as a government, interested in this as a problem, if we were interested in is it as a solution to a problem, then we wouldn't be demonizing, number one. We wouldn't be threatening, number two. Sure. And really what we'd be doing is we'd be talking to Mexico as to what can be done while they're in Mexico to meet their needs and to find out why they're there. And then we also would be dealing with Guatemala, Honduras, and the other nations they're coming from, because you heard President Trump say, was it today, I believe, because every day is something new.
He's shutting the border.
That he wants to cut off aid to Guatemala and Honduras, which would take this problem and pour gas on it. Yeah, so what economic aid maybe we were giving to these nations that might help address the crime, the poverty, what police assistance we might be giving Honduras, Guatemala to deal with the violence and the drug dealing so that these people could live in their own homes, right?
Sure.
He wants to cut it off. So you're taking a problem and making it worse. You're not finding a solution. The solution is to address why these folks feel the need to leave their homes in desperate circumstances and head this way several thousand miles.
Yeah.
Since they're already on their way, the real solution now is to deal with our neighbor to the south, Mexico, to see what we can do with them to interact peacefully with these people and address their circumstances if we're really worried about them coming to our border, so that we're dealing with those circumstances in a civil, level-headed way. Instead, it's being made into a political bomb.
Well, that's typical of Trump. He's insulted the president of our southern border and the prime minister of our northern border. And these are our friends and allies, and now we want to tell them to be decent toward us, and we don't have a working relationship with them because they're so insulted.
And it's in their advantage then to take the folks who are dissatisfied and say, go where you will.
Yeah.
And not to address the problems in their own country when we do that. Yeah. It's almost like you cut off your nose to spite your face, like my grandmother used to say. Yeah. But what's happening in these midterm elections is you'll see my opponent in this election talk about, well, open borders. Are you for open borders? No one's for open borders. We're for smart borders, smart, secure borders.
Of course. Yeah, we have open doors, but doors have locks on them. We know when to close the door, when to open the door. It's just decency, common decency.
Right.
And here in Oklahoma, we have the largest prison population in the world, of females particularly, but not exclusively. This is the buckle of the Bible Belt. We have a high school dropout rate, out of wedlock pregnancies. And we've been dominated by the same conservative influence for decades. Mm-hmm. We need change.
Let me just step right on that, because when we talk about per capita, we lock up more people, our population, than any place else in the world.
Right.
First it was female, now it includes males per capita. Mm-hmm. So I was an assistant attorney general under Robert Henry at the end of the 80s, and we saw this wave coming where politically it was lock everybody up, 3 strikes you're out, no in between. Now, everybody could tell what that was going to end up with. That was going to end up with overcrowded prisons, broken families, a cycle of poverty in those communities continues on. The breadwinner's not there, the family structure's broken, and then it just continues on. The children have little else to do except to look to the wrong means to make a living. Yeah. So we saw that coming, and sure enough, here it is on our doorstep. And it's happening on the federal level, too. I'm running for United States representative. On the federal level, what they've done in Congress is they have tightened up to the point of irrationality the federal sentencing guidelines, which means when you're convicted of a crime, all right, you've done wrong, you're convicted, a judge literally has to look up sentencing guidelines. And there used to be the judge had some discretion based on the pre-sentencing investigation that they have to do before the judge sentences the person, and other reports and things that are done. Now the sentencing guidelines are so tight that the judge has very little, if any, discretion. And somebody who, based upon all the circumstances, the judge may or may not want to give them, throw the book at them, or maybe not throw the book at them, but they still are punished, has very little discretion. So more people in federal prisons too. Same thing's happening on the state level with state legislation they passed not so many years ago. So what do? We have to be smart on crime, okay? No one wants to be easy on crime.
Right.
We want to lock up people we're afraid of, not people we're mad at.
Right.
And we also want to spend, a penny saved, it's a penny earned.
Yeah.
We always want to talk about what we can do to re-educate, educate, and to bring folks who've made these mistakes into a better part of their living through education. And you know, if we want to address unwanted pregnancies in this country, the number one way to do it is not to scream and yell at each other,
Right.
not to go ballistic and just at opposite ends of the room. The number one way to do that is education and accessible, affordable health care. And then the problem is largely addressed.
Yeah.
But that's a harder solution to arrive at than just yelling at each other.
Well, yeah, I believe that you should light a candle rather than just cursing in the darkness, and we're trying to do that. The darkness is there, but we have candles to light. Health care, woman's care, and caution. Sometimes people act like Democrats are all immoral because they support a woman's choice. I'm both pro-life and pro-choice.
Sure.
My church had one of the largest adoption agencies and home for unwed mothers. We adopted babies across the country.
Which is wonderful.
Yeah, of course it is. And you being with your Catholic background and Episcopalian, I don't know people that don't respect life. There may be some really evil people on this planet who don't respect life. But we also must respect the living. Not those who just are unborn, but the living. I was at the Tulsa Boys Ranch for their 100th anniversary, and I loved giving the invocation there, and I had dinner the other night with Jerry, and it's just a wonderful opportunity to hear these kids who are in foster care programs, and there are hundreds of them, who stay in many, many homes, and it made me think about parenting. And unwanted, unwelcome children, and the whole foster care program, and how we don't need to keep kids to be warehousing wounded children, who many of whom end up in prison, and prison's more punitive than rehabilitative. What do you think about privatizing of prisons, and what do you think about the difference between punishing people and rehabilitating people, and what we can do both as a state and as a nation to address that issue?
Sure, two good questions. One, I do not support private prisons. I do not support prisons for profit.
Good.
That can lead to no good thing.
Gotcha.
All that can lead to is contracts between the state or the federal government where there is a price tag and there is an incentive to fill those prisons up, or the government, state or federal, is paying that private corporation for empty beds. So you see how that works out. And then you have a corporation in charge of a prison who is really about a profit margin, and that means dire situations get worse because there's a basic human rights involved in prison, such as sanitation, basic health care needs, and food and mental health care needs. So look, we don't need private prisons. I understand the dynamic that is involved in that, but once you privatize the prison system, then you've set up a series of politicians on state and federal level who become dependent on the contributions from those corporations.
And our tax dollars as well.
Right. But think about this. If it's privatized and you're in office, you have an incentive because those folks come to you with large contributions.
Of course.
And you then have an incentive to keep that system going. And I hate to sound cynical, but that's actually very practical. Now, your second question was, remind me, Bishop, so I don't answer the right one.
I talked about the difference between punitive and rehabilitative.
That's right. You know, what we've gotten to the system now where we're so behind the eight ball in the prison system that there is not money or resources to make it anything but a punitive system, which means that our prisons at this point are not only a bad place to be, but in a place like Oklahoma where the guard per inmate ratio is about 11 to 1, where the gangs are running the prisons. Because the guards don't have the resources to manage the gangs, except to lock the doors and keep them all in. So, if we got to the point to where we were trying to run them like we meant them to be, correctional facilities, right? That not only house the people who we're truly afraid of and cannot walk among us. And there are people like that.
Of course there are.
When I was in the Attorney General's office, I'm sad to say, I met people like that who, for one reason or another, they were unable to walk among us and be safe, us be safe. Mm-hmm. But for the rest, the potential to rehabilitate, the potential to educate, the potential to make them productive members of society, still there.
Unlimited. Yeah.
But we haven't dedicated the resources. So we've gotten to the point to where we've tried to be mad at everybody as opposed to be smart about it. And that's very expensive. It's a lot more expensive to put someone in prison than it is to educate them in a school.
Yes, of course it is. And I've heard those statistics for years and have been involved. I have a lot of family members that went to prison, from uncles and cousins to my own brother. And I've gone in and out of the prisons for years. When I pastored, we had a huge, consistent prison ministry, and some of those ministries are still going, even though we don't have the higher interventions ministry anymore. But the word penitentiary comes from the word penitence, which means repentance or to change your mind. Once you go to the pen to repent or rethink, and once you rethink, and we help people rethink, we should, then we should let them out. When they don't rethink why they did what they did, and we don't help them walk them through, we're not doing anything that is rehabilitative. We've got to enact policies and principles that protect the human being, and even if they're in prison. As a state, well, you would be a federal representative. What would you present, or do you know something that's already on the table in Congress that you would support regarding this?
Sure. From the federal level, again, what we have to look at is the federal sentencing guidelines, and make them in a fashion that the federal judge, and we don't have very many generous federal judges, okay, has more discretion as to who they're actually putting in prison, or who they're putting on house arrest, or halfway houses, or probation. We have to give them that little more discretion in that regard. The other thing is the federal prisons aren't that far behind the state prisons as far as not being adequate, not being safe, and not being rehabilitative. So we have to be a penny wise. By working on that system, we're saving ourselves money in the long run and the middle run.
There's so much anger and hurt. Let's do a little spot, Jace, and come back. Let's run the Congressman spot and one on Come Monday. Okay. And then we'll get to some other sticky but important questions. I don't know what they are yet, but I'll think. So don't get nervous.
Hello, everybody. I'm Carlton Pearson, and I am so excited about the beginning of ComeMonday.org. Come Sunday was the movie. Come Monday is the movement into broader enlightenment in life. And as a member of Come Monday, you'll receive one video each Monday for the entire year. That's 52 videos in total that you'll receive every Monday morning to get your week started out on a positive and powerful note. I will also be sending you one each day, Monday through Friday, that will support the thought of the week. That's 260 emails throughout the entire year to inspire the genius inside of you. We will also provide a private Facebook group so that we can all come together in a safe environment and discuss personal, pertinent, powerful issues. You will also receive a digital monthly newsletter full of interesting updates and current events and exciting pictures. And I also want to offer you special VIP access to all of my events when I'm in a city near you, because I love to meet my peoples. And finally, we'll offer special pricing to cruises, concerts, live events, all for standing with us and becoming a Come Monday member. So sign up now at the special introductory rate of just $3 a month. That's just $36 for everything for an entire year. I think I'm going to sign up for that myself. You're on your way to greater enlightenment. I want to meet you there in consciousness. So go to your phones and computers now. Sign up and meet me come Monday.
Kevin Hern and Donald Trump think voters...
No, wait a minute. I'm Tim Gilpin. And I don't approve of ads that treat voters like they're stupid. It's 2018, and the last people we need in Congress are the same old phony politicians who try to get your vote with their slick 30-second parades of empty promises. I mean, who doesn't appreciate hardworking guys in hard hats? Or children running through a field, grandparents sipping coffee, and puppies. I won't try to persuade you to vote for me based on the rolled-up sleeves of my blue-collared shirt, or the cool, hip people I'm pretending to share a laugh with, or tug on your heartstrings standing in front of a billowing American flag. It's time for real talk and real solutions. I'm Tim Gilpin, and I'm interested in serving the people of Oklahoma, not special interests. It's time to put people first again. Now that's a message I can approve of.
Cool. Brilliant spot. You got a new one coming out soon.
That's right.
But according to the Tulsa World article I read on you, your opponent, the Republican candidate, is full-on free enterprise, tax cuts, and Donald Trump.
Right.
To
100%
him,
Donald Trump.
Huh?
100% Donald Trump, 100% of the time.
Yeah, I've so many commercial spots, both in the primary and now. They invoke the name Trump to get votes. It's almost embarrassing to me because I travel all over the country and outside the country, and if people are asking us, because everybody has opinions, but why, particularly the evangelical church, and here the Buckle of the Bible Belt right here in Oklahoma, do we have such, what's the preoccupation, almost as if people are under some kind of Trump spell, and that he could do no wrong. For him to say I can walk down the middle of Fifth Avenue and shoot somebody and I'd still not lose my... That would have been an insult to me, but he said it, and it's true.
Yeah, I think it's an insult too.
Yeah, and for these guys, I mean, your opponent will invoke the name Trump, and most of the GOP candidates are doing that, and it's as a trigger sign in this state that that's the God-fearing person that, and Trump doesn't fear anything, including God. So I don't, except losing,
right?
Because this is a referendum on him, and he sees it and he calls it. I like the fact that he's authentic. That what you see is what you get. I'm not sure about Pence at all, but Trump just says it like it is. People like that, but he's sort of had a big coming out party for all the haters on the down low. And I normally would not talk about it because I respect the solemnity of the office, but this is a critical issue.
Oh, yeah.
In our country and outside the country.
Right.
I have some very prominent friends connected to business people who are business people or connected to government, from the Knesset to parliaments and leadership in other countries, that are alarmed and astounded and befuddled by this man's arrogance. And he has no tact, no taste, no moral compass, or compassion or conscience. I'm stunned.
Right. Well, I think a lot of us are stunned. Most Americans are stunned. I just think it's almost like the shock of it day in and day out. Now, we can't think that that's normal.
We shouldn't think that it's normal.
I mean, it's like you kind of get used to it. Remember in the beginning, every day was horrible. And then you kind of got used to the shock and the rudeness and the disrespect. You know, I was on a local radio station for a news program, and they said, okay, what can't you definitely not agree with the GOP? Yeah. You've talked about what you are about, what you want to try to compromise on, and I cannot agree on the dysfunction, the chaos, and the disrespect. I just can't. I mean, I can disagree with my opponent, and he can disagree with me, but that doesn't mean it's personal disrespect and rudeness to one another.
To anybody and everybody. Right. There are no limits. There are no restraints.
Because what that does is it polarizes the rest of us, because it's from the top down.
Yeah, I know.
You know, if you elect a leader who is intelligent, thoughtful, well-spoken, well, then that's the example that's set. And fathers and mothers and communities, they tend to see that and like that. But if you elect a leader who is rude, disrespectful, talks down to people, calls women horseface and worse.
Yeah,
well,
that he's abused.
Yeah, you know what? It gives the wrong kind of people the incentive to act the wrong way, and it gives the rest of us, some of us, a license in that regard.
Sure.
And I just think it's so important, whether you agree or disagree with me or my opponent, that we understand that we're Americans. We believe in the American vision We believe in competition, but the opportunity to compete. See, folks will talk about competition, but they don't always talk about the opportunity to reach that starting line.
Sure.
You know, because not all of our communities have the opportunity to reach that starting line. Not everybody has the best schools, the best hospitals, if any.
That's very true.
Grocery stores.
Very true.
I mean, right here in the First District. And the First District is rural areas and urban areas.
Yeah.
You know, and there are communities that I will serve and represent who are underserved and who are looked down upon sometimes and who don't get the respect from the officials that other people do and might.
Yeah.
And I just don't think that's government. I don't think that's the American vision. You have to have an equality and opportunity. You have to have the ability, and that means education, that means health care, and that means the basics of public service in all of our communities.
Yeah, of course. That seems so. There's 7.8 billion of us on the planet, and all of us basically want the same thing: food, shelter, education, love. And we've been here all these millions of years. It's not that difficult to achieve, but we have leaders who are more self-centered and more self-serving than the purpose of being in office for the people. Politics, policy, politeness, police, all from polis, Greek word for citizen, or to citizenry, citizenship. The government, politics has become less polite.
Right.
And that's very bothersome to me and disturbing
It's
to
become
the country.
rude.
Outright rude.
Right.
And
I mean, we have politicians in other states, at least, who have beaten up members of the press.
yeah, body slammed them.
Right.
And complimented by the president, though.
Right, right. At the same time as Saudi Arabia kills
Yeah. And
a
then
legal American resident who works in America at their consulate in Turkey.
Yeah.
I mean, these are just things that whether you agree with the foreign policy of the Middle East,
Right.
the foreign policy of Iran versus Saudi Arabia, whatever, when you get to the point where American residents are murdered in another embassy, then murder, I think, is an easy line to draw.
Right.
And then we talk about some politicians, including the president, about, well, the Saudis buy $110 billion worth of arms for the United States. Well, guess what? That arms deal was being negotiated under Obama.
Right.
And still hasn't amounted to what they claim it will. It's kind of like if you and I said, well, I really would like to buy, but you never signed the contract and you never exchanged the money. But money is being used as an excuse to water down murder.
Yeah.
And that's something we can't do.
And we shouldn't tolerate it at all. It's open for the whole world to see. This is not just Americans.
Right.
It's the world watching us. We call ourselves the example, and you know, we're superpower. We're super political. We're super pathetic right now. And
where do we get to the point where a strong man who leads Turkey, who's anything but democratic,
right.
An authoritarian, is more sane
Yes.
than our president
I know.
on a murder of an American resident,
I know.
a legal American resident who worked in America in that consulate. So it's a matter of we have to elect leaders who aren't using us, but who are serving us. And I feel used when politicians on high look down on us and think they're going to fool us. They're going to fool us and talk about health care, but not give it to us, right? They'll talk about, I'm going to revoke the Affordable Health Care Act, Obamacare, but I don't know what I'll replace it with.
Yeah.
I'm going to pass a tax plan that Congress passed that benefited the richest of the richest of the rich. And whatever crumbs fell to the middle and the working poor evaporates in a matter of years. So think no further than American Airlines and the Transport Workers Union here
Right.
at our giant maintenance plant, which
Right.
we should be so proud of.
Absolutely.
We should be so proud that this is a globally competitive maintenance facility with highly trained, highly educated, extremely competent, skilled.
Decent people. I have a lot of friends who work
Right.
there.
And you know what? American Airlines got billions and billions and billions of dollars of break from this tax plan.
Of course.
They gave some of the workers a one-time bonus. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
And now they're renegotiating that union contract, and they want to cut thousands of jobs at the Tulsa facility and move that maintenance work over to China, the Philippines, South America, where those workers aren't unionized. We cannot easily verify their level of education, training, or certification. And guess what? Those are the planes that you and I get on every day.
Yeah.
And it's not just tightening up the bolts. That's a sophisticated level of maintenance involving highly technical X-rays and censoring devices to find cracks and problems ahead of time. That's a long way of saying, look, they passed a tax bill that was for the richest of the rich, and it didn't trickle down very far. Yeah, and what's happened is you can look no further than those maintenance plants out there at the airport.
I get alarmed with so many very wealthy people. Now, we shouldn't discriminate against them running for office.
No.
Your opponent is a multimillionaire, and it's getting to the place where if you're not a very wealthy person, you can't or shouldn't run.
Sure.
I'm so happy for the examples of where people who aren't wealthy have won elections already within the progressive mindset Democratic Party already. It's looking really, really good for some in certain areas that were big Trump supporters in the past, but now they've been stunned because the arrogance of the elitists, the haves and have-nots, and the racists. There's racism and economic disparities out there, and sometimes the very wealthy, not all of them, because I know some very wonderfully humble and generous wealthy people, but the general attitude is that if you're poor, you're cursed.
Right.
The gods are against you. That's in all cultures of the world, the caste systems of the world. You've got to be able to do well, and it's not like you're putting millions of your own money in this. You don't have millions of your own money to put into this campaign. You're depending on people like us, common people who care for a cause and will support you both with the ballot and with the checkbook.
Right.
Or there's no gift that's too small that somebody could give to support the cause that we'd be running these commercials many, many more times. And I'm not trying to be partisan, but I'm talking to you because I respect your moral conscience and your concern for humans, hurting humanity, suffering humanity, and not just those who are victims, but they're victimized. Just because we get mistreated, that doesn't mean we're necessarily victims. We're really victors over circumstances, but you're pulling people up. And I respect the fact that you, in a largely GOP red mentality, would even dare to run. That says something about your character and your courage. That you could have just said, forget it. I mean, the Republicans have it. This is a red state. They're all big Trump guys. Why would I waste my time and money?
But you can't think that way. You know, Oklahoma is a populous state.
Populous.
You know, right. We were the last kind of real frontier on the American continent. And what's really happened is we went from this populist idea of labor equality, hard work, to we kind of bought into this almost a selfish sense of denial, I think, at times. I don't begrudge you your success. Your hard-earned, hard-fought for, hard-worked-for success at all. I don't begrudge my opponent that. I've worked hard for what I have. I don't come from a wealthy background. But I guess what the deal is when you apply the same mentality to government, right? Government's everybody. Government's not just the wealthy, it shouldn't be. Government's not just the poor, it shouldn't be. Government's everybody.
Of course.
And government doesn't run like a business because it's not a for-profit operation. You know, government isn't run by a small board of directors that benefits the board of directors and a slightly larger group of shareholders to enrich themselves through profit. Government is for everybody. It doesn't mean we don't run it efficiently as possible. Doesn't mean we don't run it as determined to do the best job possible with the least amount of means that are required to do the best job possible. But it means that it's not a business. And when you think of a business, then you start thinking about making profit off privatizing Department of Human Services, privatizing prisons, and those aren't systems that are designed to make money in a society that's running well. Otherwise, you're abusing people. So I don't want you or anyone else to think, oh gosh, Oklahoma's so red, because the simple fact is Oklahoma's changing. Political winds go both ways. You know, I was so excited to finally see the teachers of Oklahoma stand up and walk out.
Saw that.
That helped everybody.
Yeah.
And they are really probably the wind beneath our wings to better things.
Of course they are.
I was so proud to see parents and grandparents stand up and say, education is indeed the fundamental building block of our society, our economy, our communities. Because it's gotten so bad in Oklahoma. And none of us can drive on the roads and be proud of them or the bridges.
Right.
None of us can look at hospitals closing. There was a recent hospital closing in Pauls Valley.
I heard that.
Pauls Valley. I mean, the very day that hospital's doors were locked, people who didn't know were driving there for emergency care who didn't make it.
Yeah.
So rural hospitals and our urban hospitals are at stake. You know, that means that we expand Medicaid under the Affordable Health Care Act.
Sure we do.
That means we look at supporting our medical institutions and our physicians so they're able to provide the care people need. I mean, all of those things are woven together, and that's what makes for good government and enables you and me and my opponent and everybody else to still compete in a system where they have equal opportunity to make it to the starting line, which is not always the case.
You know, Oklahoma, I've been here 40, almost 50 years. These are some of the most decent, kind, thoughtful, positive people, I think, maybe in the country. We have some deep-seated injuries and errors of the past, but the people you meet in general, especially in the little small cities, some I know are racist, but just when I say racist, I don't mean they want to kill me. I'm a racist in the sense that I cater toward my people, but I don't judge people for not being black.
Sure.
People are by nature racist, but we don't have to go along to get along. We can mind many of the same things with having the same mind about everything. That's the approach I'd like to see taken. I sense it coming to you. I don't sense the malice and the antagonism, and you're not an angry politician, an angry person. You're a gentle spirit, kind spirit. We need your energy.
Well, thank you.
In leadership in this state and in this country, and people like you. Had I known of others, which I haven't had a chance, but you came to church and I was preaching and I saw you and we got to meet. So I'm really glad that we got to do this, and I hope people can go to your site. And I will just say, can you put the site information up there? You want to know more about what this man thinks, you can ask questions, you can support. GilpinForCongress.com for the number 4 of those of you who are listening and not watching right now. Gilpin, Gilpin, for the number 4, Congress.com. And he addresses so many critical, delicate issues. And you can see other spots, hear other people's opinions. He has a cross-section of supporters in both parties, and multiracial and multi-ethnic.
That's right. We have Republicans for Tim.
Gotcha.
Every day.
Really?
Yeah. Oh, every day people come up and sign up. It's Republicans for Tim.
Great. Well, this is going to be, we got 2 weeks, a little
That's
less
right.
than that, I think, to make your...
2 weeks tomorrow.
2 weeks tomorrow. Let's get. I got registered. I moved recently. I was already registered, but even my son from Chicago made sure my daughter made sure they were registered, and we changed locations where we live, so now I get to vote at the Helmrich Library. So
oh wow,
the Helmrich family are great people in this.
They
city.
are great people. They really are.
People.
They've done good things. I want you to feel good about this. I really do. Because we've had a tremendous response. You know, in this campaign we've got on, I mean, you've met my staff.
Yes, I did.
They are young,
Delightful
they are
people.
Talented, they are smart.
So many young people. I was amazed.
Yeah, they're the best staff that has been put together to run for this office in a long, long time. And we have raised money. We need more money, obviously, because these are expensive.
Yes.
We have television. We have digital. We have people literally knocking on doors every day.
If you want to volunteer, you can go to the office.
That's
and
right.
Indicate, right.
At 1523 South Harvard.
Not far from here, 1523 South Harvard. That's the office, the working office for the congressman. I call him the congressman by faith.
Don't jinx me.
Okay. Well, let's really rally around whoever you are. Vote your conscience, and I just happen to present one of my favorite candidates in this state tonight. But and people will watch this, and it's going to be archived, and we'll pass the word. I'll put it on YouTube and all that thing. So
thank you.
We respect you, sir.
I appreciate that. It means a lot to me.
Well, it means a lot to our culture in Oklahoma and in the 1st District to have a man to have standards that you feel so strongly about that you're willing to make the sacrifices you do. I know you're busy every day, every night, constantly going places, and you may even still have something tonight.
Yeah, it's time to stand up for what's right.
For what's right.
You know, it's time to be plain, and it's time to say what's right is right, what's wrong is wrong.
Sure.
And I appreciate the opportunity.
We salute you, sir.
Thank you, Bishop.
I'm looking for the victory party, or at least I'll be there. And I'm putting that out there. Let's just believe that we can have a change. Or a vote for Tim is a vote for change. And if you want change, and I believe you do, like Einstein said, the definition of sanity is doing the same thing over the same way and expecting different results. We need different results. Let's don't be insane. Let's make a change. Let's dare to do it. Take a risk, and you don't have to be reckless. Carlton Pearson, you've been watching ComeMonday.org. I'll be here next week with another invocative. We're going to invoke, as well as sometimes provocative, presentation of ways of thinking that are edgy. I feel like you should live on the edge. If you're not living on the edge, you're probably taking up too much space. So let's get out there and make it happen. Thank you so much for your time, for your talent, for your targeted treasure of thought and mind. And the best is yet to come.
Thank you very much.
We love you. See you next time. God bless you. God be you in your character. Good night.